Yo, what is going on, guys? It's Noah here from 6Flow Automations. In today's video, we're going to be doing a deep dive into the most important node when building voice agents. That is going to be the conversational node within conversational flow agents. If you guys find this type of content useful or want to support the channel, hit that like button, drop a sub, and let's jump right into it. So once you're in your Retell AI account, you can simply make a new agent by selecting the Create an Agent button and then selecting Voice Agent. Automatically, you will be selected on Conversational Flow Agent, and since that's what we're going to focus on, I'm going to go ahead and press Start from Blank and create this new agent. Now you can see automatically that Retell adds a welcome node, which is a conversational node. Now to add a new conversation node, you can see it's the very top one on the left side tab bar. So just go ahead and click that and you will see a new conversation node pop up. Now, before we get into optimizing all the settings for this node, I want to first discuss what this node is actually doing. So the conversation node is the most commonly used node within Retell AI's voice agent. It's essentially used to have the conversation with the user, meaning that when the agent is on this node specifically, it's not going to be calling any functions. It's not going to be performing any actions. It's simply going to be conversing with the user on the other side of the phone call. Now, a lot of the time, this node is being used to gather information from the user on the other side of the phone call, but it can also be used to give information to the user. So a quick example of this is the welcome node that Retell has already put here. It says, "Hello, this is customer support department. How can I help you today?" So the point of what this node is trying to do is gather information on why this user is calling. And using the information it collects, we can then use transitions to ensure that the agent is following the correct flow and providing the information that the user requires. On the other hand, you can also use a conversation node to talk to the agent directly. So an example of this would be if you have a connected knowledge base and you want the agent to refer to the knowledge base whenever it doesn't have the information within the node. You can do that by simply adding a conversation node, and within the prompt box, you can talk directly to the agent saying something like refer to the knowledge base if the user asks about XYZ, right? Now that we've talked a little bit about what the conversational node actually is, I want to get deeper into a few of the essential settings that you need to understand in order to optimize these nodes for your voice agents. So the first thing I want to discuss is the prompt for static sentence. As you can see right here, you can either select prompt or static sentence. Now, there's not too much to this. A static sentence essentially means the agent is going to repeat exactly what you write. So this is really good for stuff like an opening message where you want it to be consistent every single time. That's why when we select the welcome node, you'll see it was automatically selected on static sentence so that every single time the agent receives a call, it's going to repeat, "Hello, this is customer support department. How can I help you today?" Now, majority of the time you will be using the prompt function versus the static sentence because you want the flow to be more dynamic since you won't know how every single call is going to go. This way you give the agent a little bit of breathing room to decide what it wants to say to lead the conversation down a route that it knows it can succeed in. When you're using the prompt option, you want to be talking to the agent. You don't want to be talking as if you are the agent like we do with a static sentence. So like we saw earlier, the welcome node is automatically set to static sentence and the agent is going to repeat exactly what we've written right here, which is, "Hello, this is customer support department. How can I help you today?" If I wanted to use the prompt function instead of the static sentence for this welcome node, I would say something more like greet the user and ask why they are calling. And you can sort of see that now I'm talking towards the agent rather than having the agent repeat what I've written. Great, so now that we've talked a little bit about what prompt versus static sentence means, I want to dive more into what the transitions are. So as you can see here, Retell has already added two transitions for us, those being user needs to return the package, user needs to check the order status. So these transitions allow the agent to decide which path it needs to take to satisfy the customer's needs. So because we already have two transitions added, I'm just going to add a third one to show you how you actually add a transition, which is just going to be hitting this plus button right here, and we're going to select prompt first. So most transitions you use will be prompt because you need the agent to think which transition it needs to take to satisfy the customer. So a third transition we can add to this example right here is if the user wants to cancel their order, let's say. To do that, I'm going to type in user needs to cancel order. And it is as simple as that to add a transition, right? Now we have three transitions and the agent can decide which route it needs to take based on the user's input. Now, as you saw, the other option we can do with transitions is using an equation, and I don't want to touch too much on this because it's a little bit more advanced and it's not really necessary for building any complex agent. But if I did want to add an equation, I would select equation, and you can see that we can set the condition to either any or all, meaning that the number of conditions we add, they either all have to be true or just one of them has to be true. So to add a condition, you just press the add condition button right here. And then here's where you can set the variable equal to, greater than, not equal to, and any operation you really want to the actual value. Now, again, I don't want to focus too much on the equation transition because you will likely not be using it at all, but I will give you a quick example just so you have a better understanding of how you could use it if you wanted to. So let's say we had an inbound real estate agent that was taking offers on a property that is up for sale. So I'm going to add a new conversation node, and I would say something like, how much are you offering for this property? Obviously, this isn't a super realistic example because this isn't necessarily how real estate conversations go. But just to give you a quick example, I would ask how much are you offering for this property? And then I would store that in a variable called offer, let's say. I would then add the equation transition by selecting equation, and then I'll leave the condition on any because for this, we're just using one condition anyways. And I will add the variable like this. I would say offer. And then I would switch the operation to greater than, and then put in the value, let's say 400,000, just like that. So that's how you could use the equation transition if you wanted to. But again, you can do this exact same thing with the prompt transition. I really wouldn't worry too much about the equation transition. So let me go ahead and delete this. All right, so now you have a little bit better understanding of how the transition works. Let's get more into the node settings. So when you select a node, you will see the node settings pop up in the right side tab bar, and you can see there are a few different options we can choose. The first one is going to be skip response. Now this is pretty self-explanatory. When you toggle this on, it's going to skip the response of the user. So as you can see, once I toggled it on, it took away all the other transitions and it added one called skip response. Now this node setting you actually may use a few times because it's great for transitioning conversation nodes into stuff like function nodes or call transfer nodes. So for example, if we had an agent that's booking a meeting, you can have a conversation node that says, let me check if that time's available. Right? So we have this conversation node right here. We don't actually need a response from the user to then transition into the function node that actually checks. So in this case, I would enable skip response. I would add my function node. I don't actually have a function node, but I will just add this like that. And then I would connect it simply like that. So that's an example of when you would use the skip response setting. Great, so the next setting we're going to look at is the global node setting. Now this is actually an extremely useful setting, and I highly suggest learning it and using it because what it does is it allows the agent to jump to this node at any point during the conversation. Whereas if you didn't have this on, you would need something connected to this node for the agent to be able to get to that node. Now, a very common use case for enabling the global node is when you have a conversation node where you're telling the agent to refer to the knowledge base if it is unclear how to answer a certain question. So if I add a new conversation node and I say something like refer to the knowledge base whenever the user asks a question, all I would need to do is enable the global node and then give a description for when the agent should jump to this node. So I'd say jump to this node if the user has a question, something like that. Another example that you might want to do is, let's say the user wants to speak to a human. You can add a conversation node that says, tell user, of course, you will transfer them now. And then this is a great example of when we could use the skip response. So I'm going to turn that on. And then what I would do is add the call transfer and connect that to this node. And then now what we'll do is we'll set this node as a global node, and then we'll give it a description that says, jump to this node if the user asks to speak to a human. Simple as that. And then the other thing you could do with a global node, which I never really need to do, is add a global node example. So you can just give the AI an example of when it needs to jump to this node. Now, the next setting I'll discuss quickly is block interruptions. Again, that's pretty self-explanatory. If you don't want the agent to be interrupted while it's performing this node action, then you would simply just toggle this on. But most of the time that's not the case. So I never really use this function. Same with the LLM. You could choose a different LLM for this node, but again, not very necessary unless you're going super in depth in your agent and you want to use GPT-5 for a little bit more thinking versus 4.1, but you don't want to set the entire agent to GPT-5. But again, I don't really use this either. A few other things, you can add a node knowledge base, so you can connect the knowledge base specifically to this node only rather than the entire agent. I haven't actually used that before, but it does seem like a decent feature. If we had a node like this, we can actually just connect the knowledge base right to this node rather than to the entire agent itself. And then the last setting here is fine-tuning examples. So add examples to train the AI agent for how to handle specific scenarios when on this node. That usually isn't super necessary, but if you're testing your your agent and you notice for some reason it keeps messing up on this specific node, adding a fine-tuning example might be helpful. All right, and to finish off the video, I've pulled up an actual example of a complex voice agent that is currently live for one of our clients. I just pulled up this agent to give you a few real-life examples of when you would use specific settings, how the transitions work, and how you actually enter a prompt into a conversation node. So first, I'll scroll down here and you can see I have two global nodes set up. The first one is tell the user feel free to reach back out if they've ever changed their mind and politely end the call. So this is an end call global node, and you can see the description I gave it is if the user got angry or is not interested at all. So this is a very rare use case, but we do want to have this just in case the situation does happen. The agent can always jump to this node if they ever think that the user on the other end of the phone call is angry or just not interested whatsoever. And then the second global node that I have is the call transfer node. So you can see here I say, let me connect you with Dave from our team who can help you further. Please hold on for just a moment. And right here, you can see I use the skip response transition because from this conversation node, it does not require a response from the user. So I skip the response and I go right into the make transfer call. If you guys want to learn more about the call transfer function, I have an entire video breaking it down, which I will link up above. Now, if I just scroll back out and let me head over to the welcome node, you can see here I've written a pretty long welcome node, but this was a specific request from the client, which is why it's written like this. But you can see I have three transitions labeled. One is if the user wants to become an SDR or advance their sales career. Two is if the user indicates they are a company, a founder, a startup, and so on. And three, the user has questions about the company or wants to learn more about the services. Now, these three transitions are so important because you can tell it goes down three massive routes. So it is very important that you prompt your transitions correctly, you prompt the node correctly, and you know when to turn on specific settings. And that is pretty much it, guys. Like I said at the beginning of the video, you will be using the conversational node hundreds of times while you build your voice agents because it is going to be your best friend when building. I hope you guys found this content useful, and if you did, hit that like button and drop a sub. It would mean a lot to us, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.